Negotiable Instruments Act, Section 80, Interest when no rate specified. Section 80 of the Negotiable Instruments Act, 1881 lays down the rule regarding payment of interest where a negotiable instrument does not specify any rate of interest, thereby ensuring that the holder is compensated for delay in payment. The provision establishes a statutory rate of interest and also prescribes the period for which such interest is payable where the instrument is silent regarding interest. 1. Applicability of the provision. This section applies when a negotiable instrument such as a promissory note, bill of exchange, or cheque becomes due and no rate of interest is specified in the instrument itself. In such circumstances, the law supplies a default statutory rate of interest to compensate the holder for delay in payment. 2. Statutory rate of interest. Section 80 provides that where no rate of interest is mentioned in the instrument, interest shall be calculated at the rate of 18% per annum, and this statutory rate applies automatically by operation of law. The purpose of the provision is to ensure that the holder receives compensation for being deprived of the use of the money due under the instrument. 3. Effect of agreements between parties. The section specifically states that the statutory interest applies notwithstanding any agreement relating to interest between the parties to the instrument, where the instrument itself does not specify any rate of interest. Accordingly, outside or separate agreements generally do not override the statutory rule for recovery under the instrument, and the law gives primary importance to the contents of the negotiable instrument itself. 4. Commencement of interest. Interest under Section 80 is calculated from the date at which the amount ought to have been paid by the party charged, and therefore interest begins from the date of default or maturity rather than the date of the instrument. The starting point depends on when the liable party became legally obligated to make payment, and thus interest accrues from the time payment should properly have been made. 5. Duration of interest liability. The section provides that interest continues until the amount due is tendered, realized, or until such date after the institution of a suit as directed by the court. I. Interest until tender. If the liable party makes a proper and lawful tender, being an unconditional and valid offer to pay the amount due, interest stops accruing from that date. 2. Interest until realization. Where payment is not tendered, interest continues until the actual realization or recovery of the amount, compensating the holder for continued deprivation of money. 3. Interest after institution of suit. Where a suit is filed to recover the amount, the court may determine the date up to which interest shall continue after the institution of the suit. 6. Indusser's liability. The explanation to Section 80 provides that an indusser becomes liable to pay interest only after receiving notice of dishonour, and such interest accrues from the date of receipt of the notice. 7. Reason for special rule regarding indussers. The law treats indussers differently because their liability is secondary and conditional, and an indusser is entitled to notice of dishonour before liability becomes enforceable against him. Therefore, it would be unfair to impose liability for interest upon an indusser for any period before he was informed of the dishonour of the instrument. For more details, contact us.